Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Corner Blue, episode 6. I'm Hugo Alvarado.
And I'm Andres Rico.
And today we have some very interesting topics to talk about. Lots going on around La Selecta. We have a new bus. Andres is very excited about the bus. So if you want to talk a little bit about it, Andres.
Yeah, so the theme of this episode is moving on. And what other better way of moving on than seeing the Selecta finally having a new team bus in El Salvador. I don't know if you're aware of it, but the previous one was like a charter bus from like the 90s or 80s. I mean, it had a nice little paint job for a little bit where it had some of the sponsors on it. They painted it blue and it looked nice for a little bit, right? But then it kind of started to wear out. You start reading stories of it stalling and breaking down along the way. And it seems like finally the Fesfut put some money together and bought a new bus.
Yeah, I was kind of joking at the beginning, but it is always important for the national team to have a reliable method of transportation. And it is important for the players to feel in a professional environment when they are going. Yeah, when they're going to play the games to qualify for the next World Cup, because obviously we're gonna put up a fight and make it to the octagonal.
Yeah, so based off of reports out of El Salvador, the bus costs like $130K, which I mean, I don't know. I've never been in the market for a bus, but seems like a lot of money. And it's 5 years old. The paint job looks nice. It has a Mexico on it. But it definitely is an upgrade from the previous one. I actually got to ride on it back in the day when I was covering La Zulita, when they were on their way to the airport to go to Turkey. El Tuco let me crashed the party. I jumped on the bus, no press credential, anything. I just from talking with El Tuco at previous trainings, and I told him what I was up to with the documentary. So they let me ride in there, got to hang out with the players, get shots of them, seeing them excited and anxious, and then just taking that trajectory all the way to the airport was a lot of fun. It was pretty cramped in there. And so this one looks like it's nice, has that space, so we're moving along.
Yeah, great memories from that U20 national team. Maybe someday we should do an episode on our experience traveling with that U20 in Turkey. That was like one of the best experiences I ever had, traveling with the German consulate in Turkey and being escorted by all the police, and that was just amazing to be over there in Turkey. So maybe next episode we can talk about Hugo's and Andres' adventures with the Azulita in Turkey.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about there. Lots of fun stories and random anecdotes, and just observing the process of being in a World Cup from as close to inside as possible. So yeah, that was definitely a lot of fun, and hopefully we can talk about that later on along the road.
Yeah, definitely. But we have some interesting news just coming out of the oven.
Moving along.
Oscar Seren apparently is making the move to Spain.
Yeah. And
however, we don't know. We don't know the team. All we know is that he's gonna go to Spain.
Yeah, in classical Salvadoran fashion, news is left kind of half-baked. So Alianza today announced on their social media that Oscar Seren is leaving the squad to be determined or announced team in Spain. So we don't know what division. People are already speculating, either downplaying it or maybe having too high of expectations. At this point, wherever he lands is good news, at least to me, right?
Yeah. I think my heart would like to hear, Cadiz signs Seren, but I know that that's unlikely, or maybe some other first division team, but I still think it's unlikely. I think more realistically speaking, I think might be like a second or Segunda B, which is the third division in Spain. But it's a good move, and I think it's always important when players make a move, regardless of how the division may be perceived by the Salvadorian fans, I think that moving out of your country and playing in a different country always adds to your experience and the way you view the sport and the way you view yourself within the sport, because the expectations from the fans are different when they know you're the foreigner.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're there, is because you are better than a lot of the national um, local players. So I think that no matter where he goes, I wish him well, and he's definitely been one of the most interesting players in the last 4 years for El Salvador. Part of me wants to say, what took so long, because I
Exactly.
was hoping for that move to take place maybe 3 years ago. He's 28 now, so technically he should be at the peak of his career, but at the same time, a little late for a player like him. But he's definitely a very exciting player, very explosive, highly skilled. Definitely the Spanish league might be a good fit for him.
Yeah, we'll see what league he ends up, or sorry, what division he ends up in. It's that one threshold that still needs to be reached once again, that in Mexico Gonzalez left, of being the one and only Salvadoran player to play in the first division. And Pájaro Hueso was in other divisions. Who else comes to mind when it comes to players that have played in Spain? I mean, currently you have Josh Perez, but obviously he's affiliated in terms of with U.S. soccer and not with the Selecta. But he's in the third or second division in Spain.
Technically, it's the third. It's the
Segunda B.
Segunda B, yeah.
So yeah, it's that threshold. We obviously want to see the likes of an Oscar Seren or even an Denis Pineda playing in the top tier. You kind of wish that there would be like this stronger bond or relationship with Cadiz and soccer teams or clubs in El Salvador, which, I think at a surface level, a lot of Salvadorans have a soft spot for Cadiz just because they open the doors to Mexico and his trajectory there and his career there. But when it comes to deals, contracts, there hasn't necessarily been there hasn't been a flow at all of players getting a shot at Mexico's former club. And even when it comes to friendly matches, there were rumors of getting Cadiz to come out here to play with El Salvador in the U.S. and things not really coming into fruition. So hopefully Seren is able to break that threshold that has been there for the longest time, and hopefully find some success at this point in his career.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of Spain, I think the last we had was just some youth players who went to Cadiz, to the academy. Some FESA players, I believe. But
There's some players who were at the San Andreu too, right? Lower
yeah,
divisions in Spain,
right. And there
born
there
in
are
Spain.
yeah, there are definitely some Salvadorians in lower divisions. So that's
But
stay
in terms
tuned.
of exports,
In terms of exports, well, I do know of a couple who are Salvadorian born who are currently in Spain in lower divisions, not the ones that people know, like the San Andreu and I think there was
Leganes,
another
I think.
Leganes. There was another, he's no longer there. I've come across a few other young players who are playing in the lower youth divisions in Spain. But in terms of Cadiz, yeah, you would think, that given the history of El Mágico and Cadiz, that we would have, even when Cadiz was in the third division, that we would have some Salvadorians there. But it seems like we haven't really produced a player that is good enough to go to those leagues. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he lands, and hopefully he doesn't have a lot of time, to
Just
go up the ranks. I mean, he's 28, so we're looking at maybe a couple years. Um, there's been players like Arturo Alvarez, who I think when he went to Pasos de Ferreira, his dream or his intention for making that move was to hopefully have one successful season there and make a move to La Liga, and that didn't happen. And I kind of had the same hopes for Dennis Pineda, but now Dennis Pineda is moving to Ecuador. So I don't even know how to look at that. I don't know if that's a positive move or not. I don't really know. I know that the Ecuadorian league tends to export a lot of players. Um, so Dennis Pineda is still fairly young, but after spending a few seasons in Portugal, now moving to Ecuador, makes me wonder if that's a move backwards or forwards. I don't really know. What do you think?
I think in terms of getting minutes and playing abroad, in that sense, hopefully that'll help his development, because it seemed that it had stunted or peaked at both clubs in Portugal. With the Santa Clara, there was that hope that when they made it to the first division, oh, okay, here's his chance to succeed at the highest level in Portugal. Things didn't necessarily work out, and for whatever reason, there's been a standstill. Even before COVID, he wasn't getting minutes, and you would hope that he would, considering that he's at one of the big leagues in Europe. But I think as long as he gets consistency, the minutes you're seeing almost. We saw this little like diaspora move to Guatemala 2 half seasons ago. We're starting to see more players getting the doors open to them in South America. We really, at this point, we don't really know what is that journey that will get Salvadoran players into the top leagues of the world. The players seem to meander, take different paths, but there isn't one basically forged one. Like, let's say players from South America that go to Mexico and then to Europe. There isn't that path that is necessarily drawn out. So a lot of these players making these moves to these exotic locations are pioneers in a sense. And hopefully, in one of these countries, they make a big enough statement that the door will start opening on more players to be exported from El Salvador. So we'll see.
Yeah. That I think what you just mentioned is it's key to towards building some type of path, because
Yeah, we don't have a reputation for
we
exportable
don't
players. Yeah.
we don't. And if you look at Thailand, I mean, you may think, well, Thailand is not the greatest league in the world, but if you look at the job that Bonilla has done in Thailand, has really opened the doors for other Salvadorian players. So
Or
that's
players
the
from the league too,
yeah, exactly, like Diaz,
Mm-hmm.
who went there, and now we have Lester Blanco in the second division. And we had, I mean, previous to that, we had Christian Castillo, who played in Thailand as well. So it may not be the one of the greatest leagues in the world, but it's definitely a pretty decent league in Asia. I think they pay well, and that's always good for the players. And they have nice fields, better than what we have. But players like Bonilla, he's been a pioneer, and he has opened the doors, just like he did in Portugal as well, because he did some important things in Portugal. He was doing well, and then Dennis Pineda went over there, and Cerritos, Alexis Cerritos went over there as well. So I think when players like Seren make a move wherever he lands, whether that's the second or the third division in Spain, I'm hoping it's not fourth division. They have a responsibility. They carry a responsibility to open more doors for the players coming after them.
Yeah. Part of, I feel, of the lack of a reputation for exporting players, obviously it comes from the top bottom in terms of developing talent and whatnot. But we have seen these examples of players that do make it to, like I said before, these exotic locations, or even to Europe or the MLS. But for one reason or another, there's been this tendency of getting there, but not being able to break through the door. There's this tendency where you see players that break out, are able to get a contract in a foreign country, but for one reason or another, maybe even outside of of the sport itself, there's these factors that you see a frequency or tendency of that limits them, and all of a sudden they're back playing in the domestic league?
I think there's a few factors, two things. One is that our clubs are not really known, or they don't have a reputation for preparing professionals. And I think that although the Salvadorian league is considered a professional league, and I think there are some aspects of it that are at that professional level, everything that goes around the league, such as stadiums, method of transportation, security for the players, the bleachers, all of those things that are very, very
Wages.
wages.
Yeah.
They're in poor quality, nutrition, and all these things, all this education. I don't think there's necessarily an education for the athletes, from nutrition to maybe learning at least beginners English, which is something that they do in Costa Rica. A lot of the players from the academies in Costa Rica, part of the process is to learn English, because that's the language spoken all over the world. If you go to Austria, or you go to Thailand, or you go to Portugal, you're gonna find someone who speaks English, and if you speak English, you can get around, and it helps you feel comfortable in those countries. Versus, I speak Spanish, nobody else speaks Spanish, and they feel uncomfortable, and then they start getting homesick, and we've seen that with many players. There's El Pega Dubon's case when he went to FC Jazz in Finland. I think I read an article where he was just missing his life and his girlfriend in El Salvador. So his mind wasn't really there, so he couldn't last in that league for a while. And it's not, again, it's not like this important league, but it's Europe. So there's all of these factors that I think the education, the lack of education for the athletes, and I'm not
Or
necessarily talking about
preparation.
preparation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not necessarily
Or
talking about
realistic
academic.
goals too. There's been cases of players coming to the US, and I've read quotes of players saying, "Oh, I didn't like living in a certain area because the taxes were too high." Stuff like that determines the outcome of their careers and whatnot, or they just didn't like the lifestyle. Or I think it was with El Papo back in the day when he went to Austria, how he complained about the cold and not being able to adapt to that. So it does seem that there's all these different factors that you'd wish that the clubs would be able to help and prepare players so that when they do have those experiences abroad, it goes a lot smoother than it has been. And I mean, you have to tip your hat off to players that even sign and at least try and go abroad. Because, I mean, just thinking for myself, just thinking it for one day being told, oh, you have to move all the way over here, and trying to plan and adjust, and then on top of that perform at a top level, that to me seems very overwhelming. Granted, I'm not a player, so
Yeah.
that's not my job and to do and whatnot. And it is part of the description of being able to go at a moment's notice. But you do wish that somehow this threshold can be broken, and hopefully for Seren he does, and he's able to move up in the ranks in Spain.
Yeah. I hope. Yeah, hopefully our clubs as well start to prepare our players for those things. Things, very basic stuff that observe in the United States, for example, with the academies. You play for an academy, but you travel a lot. You get on planes and you have to go across country to play against other academies. If you make it to the youth national teams, you go to Europe, and then you live there for a whole month, and then you play friendly matches. So it's like you start developing
The exposure
that
that
exposure from an early stage. Our players don't have that. So
exactly
when
you
so when
could
they move
count
abroad.
the tournaments or camps. Like I remember, what was it? La Chelona's academy randomly would go to a certain camp, or you had amateur leagues Like I think it was Eliseo Salvadoreño had a tournament in Mexico and they made it to the final and lost it there. So you can count, or there's memorable the few instances of youth teams making it outside of the country, and that's something that you wish there would be more. And then that's kind of the responsibility that's fallen on the Fesfut, that they've been basically the only outlet of Salvadoran players to be showcased abroad, and it can't just be up to the national team, obviously.
Yeah, it has to be the clubs. The clubs have to work on that. And shout out to those players who have done it correctly. You know, we're talking the Pablo Puñets, the Andres Flores, Darwin Seren. You know, those are players that Nelson Bonilla. You know, you really have to give them credit because it's not easy for any player to go abroad and stay there. You know,
Exactly.
it's like getting there. It happens to a lot of players, and we've seen them. You know, we've seen a lot of players. You know, when we had that those players going to Denmark and Scandinavian leagues, but then they last half season or one season, and then they're back.
Hmm.
So even with the Colombian Brian
Yeah.
Hill,
Hmm.
I don't know him personally. I never spoken to him. I think he's a very interesting player. I mean, he went to a top club in
But he
Belgium
didn't speak
for some
English.
reason. I don't think so.
Yeah, no,
But you get to see, you get to have a sense if a player is going to have a shot in a particular country, especially if they're very active on social media by their behavior, by what they tweet about. And he would tweet a lot about, I missed this and I missed that and I wish I was here. You know, that tells me that his mind was not there. You know, he was not fully present. And I mean, he was there less than 6 months. In soccer, it's more than just having the talent on the field. It's a lot more and sacrifices the players have to make. So yeah, I give a lot of credit to those players that I mentioned that have gone and stayed. So
they're definitely on our radar, especially now that there's a new venture of a lot of players in South America, like I mentioned earlier. Santa Maria is playing for La Chochera in Peru now. He just scored a goal recently. You have Eric Rivera, who had a good start to the year, but obviously the pandemic slowed everything to a halt there. Seems like Roberto Dominguez is having a hard time getting into the starting 11 for Bolivar, but the hope is that maybe he'll get the chance, especially with their coach, who seems to be on the way out due to bad results in La Libertadores.
that's an interesting one because we haven't really had many players in South America.
No,
So I mean, we had
Lester was
Esnal.
in Lester was in Ecuador, I think, right?
I think he spent some time in the second division
And
in
then
Ecuador.
Burgos Junior played in Colombia for a little bit, but
He
that
didn't
didn't.
really. He didn't play.
Oh
He
yeah, he
signed.
signed.
He
Yeah,
was
yeah.
announced, but he never played. Yeah, I mean, I can't. The only players I can think of is Christian Esnal, but then he was like half Salvadorian, half Uruguayan. And then there's another similar case, a player that I think he played for Atletico Marte for a while. I can't remember his name right now, but he's also half Salvadorian, half Uruguayan. But yeah, we haven't really seen um, players, Salvadorian players in South America, and I think it's good. It's a good move.
Yeah, I think where Salvadoran players are kind of a better fit is in a league that doesn't necessarily move on marketing foreign players, because that's obviously the main factor that Salvadoran players are basically null and void of, is star power or being a big name. That doesn't mean that they're not of good quality or of their potential. But let's say in leagues like Mexico, they depend on that draw of, if you're going to be a foreign player, they like big names. They like getting their local fans excited of someone with a recognized name or a recognized country to come in, and then they trust, oh, if this guy's Colombian, he's going to be good. Or if he's Ecuadorian, he's going to be good. And if we see more of these instances, hopefully, slowly but surely, that reputation will start changing for Salvadoran players.
So moving on, we have this whole thing with Indes and Fesfut, and the possibility of Fesfut being punished by FIFA and
Yeah, I don't know if you could kind of break it down a little bit because it is a little confusing. The gist that I get is there's bylaws that any type of sports federation in El Salvador has to follow and answer by signing up or registering with INDES, which is the main governing body of sports in El Salvador. But it seems that La Fesfut is hesitant to do so out of fear of losing certain autonomy. At least that's the gist that I've gotten from everything. But I don't know if you could break it down or if it's actually different.
well, I'm like you on this one. I haven't really spent much time really researching it, but it is worth mentioning that what's happening now is not something generated by the Bukeles. In fact, the law was passed by the Salvadoran Congress a few years ago.
Yeah, this whole
Um,
mess comes from the Rodrigo Calvo days, basically.
yeah, yeah. So the difference now is that you have a government that is actually following through with it without making exceptions, or at least we have in this case, a president that is following through with the law that was signed by Congress years ago. And as far as I understand it, when Infantino was in El Salvador, Indes and Fesfut and FIFA met, and they talked about it. They talked about it, and it seems like they that it looked promising. It looks like Fesfut can potentially, um, you know, do what's required for all federations in El Salvador while still maintaining their independence and not really being affected in any way at FIFA level. Um, However, there were some changes. I believe there's some changes that must take place within Fesfut's laws in order to be compliant with what Indes or what the government is requesting. And obviously, it doesn't seem like those changes are easy to make, or Fesfut is not ready to do those. So the positive that I see in this situation, at least what we get to see from media reports, is that there is some dialogue between the three, between FIFA, Fesfut, and Indes, to try to come into some type of agreement and avoid a suspension.
Yeah, because recently you just see that the Federation of Trinidad and Tobago kind of fell into a similar circumstance where there had to be governmental intervention, and that ended up with FIFA basically banning them. We don't know for how long. We can only assume with other cases such as Guatemala's and even El Salvador's that it's not going to be a quick fix when it comes to cleaning up that mess. I was paying attention to media outlets in El Salvador this week and last week, and there were interviews for certain outlets where Raul Bertrand Bonilla spoke because he's now part of the legislature, and it seems like he's spearheading that movement of trying to, how could I put this? Basically, he's trying to call out the Fesfut for an illegal election. So he's trying to establish that by the Fesfut board being illegally elected, that it can no longer function, that it is nullified. So that was one thing that I heard that, in a sense, made was interesting to hear, but a little disconcerting. And you also had Indes and Yamil Bukele talking about the potential intervention, or at least not intervening, but trying to hold the Fesfut accountable to the Ley de Deportes that was passed before this current administration. Then you have Fesfut saying, well, we want to do this, we want to do that, and I don't know. It is this quagmire of at least the public information going out. I don't really know what the root is of not being able to sit down since last November to get this all fixed. But yes, hopefully we avoid that ban, because yes, we have so much coming up in the next year, and if we don't play, a lot of things will fall through.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a lot at stake right now with Gold Cup coming up and World Cup qualifiers happening at some point. Uh,
And that's all part
COVID,
of
yeah,
you trying to help out with the recruitment process, right? Is
yeah. So from my perspective, that's another thing in my mind right now, that there is a momentum happening right now of players like Enrico Hernandez, who have never been to El Salvador. They're born in Europe, lived in Europe, but they want to play for El Salvador. They've taken steps to play for La Selecta, and there are more players in the same case that are also taking steps towards that. And I think it'll be unfortunate if we were suspended, because we might lose that momentum that we have going on with those. Um, I don't even want to call them foreign players, because they are, yeah, I mean, foreign
foreign born.
born
Yeah.
Salvadorians. So yeah, I just hope that, at least from my perspective, what I see, I don't see any bad intent from Indes. At least that's what I get to see from a distance. But they are trying to hold Fesfut accountable, just like they do with the other federations. And
Yeah, I would like to add really quick that for now, La Fesfut is the only federation or sports federation that hasn't signed or registered or signed up with Indes.
yeah, and it makes you wonder why. I mean, I don't really know the internal politics of it. And at the same time, I do understand from my knowledge of the FIFA laws that federations are independent. So in a way, all that matters is that FIFA
Doesn't
recognizes
ban
you
us.
as a member. However, you are operating Fesfut as a business in El Salvador, and you have to follow the laws, just like U.S. Soccer. I believe U.S. Soccer is an LLC in the United States, so you still have to adhere to those laws that apply to corporations. So yeah, it's a tricky subject.
Yeah, we'll see where this all ends up, but it's unfortunately a movie that we've all seen, and it's been played out for us as recent as 11 years ago after Rodrigo Calvo's administration, where there was a normalizing commission that had to come in that ended up electing itself for the for the outgoing administration, and
And being
then
corrupt,
being corrupt itself
yeah.
and being found of money laundering and other crimes like that. So unfortunately, this mess isn't anything new. It's something that's been dragging on for years, and someone's got to clean it up. So there's people that think, you know what, we haven't really been in the running or serious contenders for either qualifying or even getting through the first round in the Gold Cup. Whatever. If we get banned, at least somehow it'll be cleaning out the swamp, to use Uncle Donnie terms. But what you're seeing is just something that keeps occurring one time and another. We'll see if they're able to avoid it. I, on the other hand, would kind of hope to see a resolution. I don't think that banning La Selecta or bring it to its knees and not having any type of competition the next 2 years would be beneficial in any way whatsoever. But ultimately, some reform has to come in where you need an open door to new opinions, new minds, new business people that can move the federation in the right direction. Because let's not kid ourselves, things are very stagnant, things are very backwards, and that is totally seen in the results.
Yep. And now, looking at what the near future has, if nothing happens with that, there might be some friendlies, according to Carrillo. Some reports that there are some possibilities of playing in Europe, maybe playing against Saudi Arabia. Japan, I
Japan.
think, was one of the possibilities. Ecuador.
Yeah, there was an option of 2 friendlies in Europe, 2 in the U.S., which would be either Ecuador or Honduras, according to Hugo Carrillo, the Fesfut president. So I mean, they're busy. They're doing something. We'll see which one lands. It is kind of ironic that here they are trying to get friendly matches for the international fixtures in November when they kind of pressured CONCACAF to cancel the first match days of the World Cup qualifiers due to worries about COVID. So that seems a little contradictory. But needless to say, I think La Selecta would benefit a lot more from being able to bring the players back from being inactive for almost a year, having not much on the line other than friendlies. I think that is a very good idea. My only question is when it comes to the ranking, will it affect us? Is that something that they're thinking about? Is it an official match day, FIFA match day or international match day, where if we lose, we could lose potential points in the ranking in case that CONCACAF decides, hey, you know what? After all the shenanigans and talk of expanding from a 6-team qualifying tournament to an 8-teamer, we're going to go back to the top 6. It's like, oh, you lost so many points against Japan. Bye. I hope that doesn't happen. But
Or we get suspended, so Canada moves up to the 6th spot, and they're
and
like,
then
okay,
okay, yeah,
never mind, let's just keep hexagonal top 6 go through.
yeah, we're running out of time. Canada, you ready?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, but hopefully that's not the case. And I also see it as a great opportunity to call on some of these new players. Some of these guys like Enrico Hernandez, and I know they're young, but it could be a great opportunity to see them. It can also be a great opportunity to kind of make sure that they stick with El Salvador, although FIFA has proposed some changes to the law. I think now it's like if you haven't played 3 games in the last 3 years with the senior team, you might still be able to make a change. Um, but I see it as a great opportunity for Enrico, for maybe an Eric Zabaleta. Um, some of the guys like Portillo in the MLS, although he's not getting minutes in MLS, but maybe the guy in Costa Rica. It could be a good couple of games to bring some of those players in and see what they got to offer.
Yeah, and speaking of Enrico, there was that photo that Ernesto Roches posted earlier this week of him with Enrico's birth certificate, right? Could you elaborate or give us an update on that? Because that's pretty interesting. Finally, there's documents.
Yeah. So funny thing about this, as you know, I'm the one who initiated that process, and I'm the one who's been helping that whole process of getting Enrico his documents ready. And his documentation, the birth certificate, has been ready since April.
Okay, so was
Since,
that
since March, April, something like that.
so was that photo recent or was that photo
No, it
from
was a
April?
recent photo. So there's positive. The Fesfut has made a move, but in terms of the process, I completed everything back in early March in terms of getting Enrico registered as a Salvadorian, getting his father's birth certificate, and everything that was asked and required to be able to register him as a Salvadorian. So basically, I can't remember the exact date right now, but the birth certificate was ready. It has been at the alcaldía in San Salvador, just ready for someone to pick it up. At first, we thought a family member would pick it up, mail it, or take a photo of it and send it over to the Netherlands so that Enrico could move on to the next step, which is get his passport
At the consulate there.
at the consulate in the Netherlands. And when Rodolfo Goches wanted to call Enrico,
For the under 23s?
for the under 23, the basically the steps were call him up. He arrives on a Sunday night, and then on Monday you take him to the alcaldía to pick up the birth certificate and process the passport, because the deadline was on Tuesday to send the final list So they saw that as a very complicated process. There was not much
No
support from
guarantees.
no guarantees, not no interest from Fesfut in investing in a plane ticket to get Enrico over there with the risk of maybe
Him
him
not
not
even
being
be able to
good
play.
enough, or not being good enough,
Hmm.
or not being able to get his documentation ready. So basically, then COVID hit, and then nothing happened. But the documents were ready. They have been ready for a while. And recently, with everything that Enrico is doing, he's the top scorer right now in the under 21 league in the Netherlands. And the more media attention, there has been more interest, and basically Ernesto, we talked, and he said, I can go get the birth certificate. And now, basically, to put it in simple terms, at this point, Enrico can get his passport in one day in El Salvador. So if we think about any friendlies, it's just a matter of calling him up a couple days prior to any camp, if they do that, and then just get the documentation ready. And there's also Enrico did play a couple of games for the Netherlands, so Fesfut has to check on that with FIFA, make sure those games were friendly, and if they were not friendly, then they have to do the whole process to change him from
And just
association.
fit. Okay.
Yeah.
So if they were friendlies, then basically they could call him up and as long as he has a Salvadoran passport, he would be eligible then.
That's correct.
Well, moving along, the theme of the episode. Finally, it seems that things are starting to pick up. Hopefully, like you said, if there's a game in Europe, that would be the perfect excuse to just, make everything work together. He meets up with the team, or someone from the federation meets up with him to process stuff, and then he can join camp. Or if the camp is in the U.S., they fly him out, with enough anticipation so he has time in country to get all that paperwork done, and hopefully he can make a debut, because we need help, and it's time to seal the deal. I think it's just taken way too long.
And he's a young player. That's the important thing. He's not someone who is waiting until he's in his late 20s to
Make a decision.
make a decision. He's young. He's 19. He's full of potential, and why not?
And that's been it, everybody. That's been episode 6. Thank you so much for spending time with us. It's been great getting feedback from some listeners. It's nice knowing that people are listening to us at work, getting through the day, through their commute. Whenever it is that you listen to us, we appreciate it. So please keep listening to us. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify or YouTube, or to our page on Facebook. I've even heard of people saying that they've heard it through word of mouth, whether through relatives or friends. And that's the type of exposure that we want, is just, get this grassroots thing going. We just want to be able to reach as many of us as possible. It's trying times, but at least we're doing this together, because some of the stuff, the news coming out of El Salvador is just mind-boggling, especially with the subjects that we touched today. But at least here we are, digesting it. Hopefully it's starting to make a little more sense to you, and we can all complain and bitch about it later on. So thank you so much. This is Enrico
and Hugo Alvarado, and thank you.
We'll
Thank
see
you
you
for
next
listening.
time. Yeah, take it easy.